Hi Neil, just a quick recap on the key points that we covered during your last visit, relating largely to the direction the sweet spot's travelling, or the place the sweet spot is situated at P6. When we got you up on the monitor, particularly with driver, we noticed that the main issue we have, and it's partly largely due to the work you've done previously, were there was a lot of flexing of the lead wrist, uncocking of the wrist to put the club out in front of the hands. That was the sort of feel that you had, and the moves that you'd been working on. And we talked about how the way you release your accumulators, so from the top of the backswing, the way the arms work, you don't make that sort of Dustin Johnson move particularly well, where the elbow sort of moves towards the ball to target line, shoulder drops back a little bit, shaft tumbles behind the hands. You tend to move the left arm away from the right shoulder at a steady rate. You tend to, as a result, straighten the right arm at a steady rate. And as we said before, because of the work you've been doing previously, the wrist would then uncock, the lead wrist would flex slightly, and you would get the club in a position where the sweet spot is ever so slightly out in front of the hands, which if you want to hit a little cut is fine. But we were talking about ways of developing this and getting you to draw the golf ball a little bit more. We've got the cane under the right arm set up to just discourage that little bit of lift that you still have in that backswing on occasion. A little bit of a lift and a twist as you approach the top. Swing on the left is early in the session with the cane underneath. Swing on the right is towards the end of the session with the cane underneath. You can see how the club at the top is in a slightly different position. There's not been as much rolling of accumulator 3 as you approach the top on the right. On the left it's a little bit twisted, a little bit too laid off. Much better position, much more in line on the swing on the right. You can also see the more time you spend with the cane underneath the arm, you start to see the body getting a little bit more involved in order to propel the butt of the club as far as you need to generate the power required to hit your driver. You're starting to turn and extend and left tilt slightly more because I've removed the ability to lift the arms. So consequently we're seeing a little bit more of a gap between the knees. So there's a little bit more turning, extending and left tilting to arrive at P4 at this point. And as you change direction, the two swings are not going to look too dissimilar. You see that the pressure point under the right arm hasn't been lost, so we don't then need to relocate the arm against the chest. As a result, we can get the club shallowing out nicely, hitting the mid-right bicep area by the time we get to P5. Now on the swing on the left, the wrist angles start to come out, accumulator 3 starts to roll slightly, and the sweet spot gets thrown out in front of the hands. The swing on the right, the wrist angles don't come out as quick. The lead wrist stays a little bit flatter for longer, and the sweet spot now is in behind the hands. And we talked about ways of producing this condition, various ways you could do it. A player, some more efficient than others, a player could get to P4 and then tuck the hips up really quickly. That would certainly get the sweet spot in behind the hands, but wouldn't be very beneficial. The player could add some bowing to the lead wrist in transition. So put some Dustin Johnson in there just as he's transitioning. I showed you Tom Dolan doing that. And again, if you can do that, great. It's a beautiful move to make. It's not necessarily a move that everybody can. And with your history of what you've worked on, I feel that would be too much of a challenge at this stage. The other thing a player can do to put the sweet spot in behind the hands a little bit more is, and control the rate, if you will, at which the wrists uncock and accumulator 3 rolls, is to move the hips in a more linear manner. So if the pelvis or the hips are moving in a more linear manner, the club will tend to stay in behind the hands a little bit more at P6, and that's what we've applied here, but we've applied it at setup. So the difference between these two swings is just a case of a combination of you being a little bit more familiar with having the cane under the arm, which means you arrive at P4 in a slightly different manner. The hips have been pushed forward at setup, so just a couple of inches forward with the hips at setup. And what we ended up with on the left, we had a very inline swing with a club face that was about 2 degrees open to the target, and we were getting little sort of shots that started slightly right and then would just bleed off a little bit further right. And it was more of a nuisance value shot. It was very much that sort of shape of shot from that position you're in on the left. Very quickly, by pushing the hips forward a little bit at P1, we started to get a path that was a little bit more from the inside, maybe 3 degrees or so. And the club face condition, again, was very similar, 2 degrees. And we started seeing the ball setting off in a similar manner and then trying to fall to the left. A little bit more of a draw pattern in there. So not really a massive change to the face angle at impact, but certainly a good change in regards to the face to path relationship, which is what the ball understands. You can see the sweet spot stays in for longer. And instead of having a very inline swing with a slightly open club face, which was tending to produce a few heel strikes as well, we start to produce a swing path that's slightly out to the right and produce a little bit more of a draw pattern. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this one goes, because certainly in my experience, when a player starts to produce a different move at P6, when P6 changes, we start to see other things calm down. Maybe not initially, but certainly, going forward a month or so down the line, we start to see some nice changes in other areas. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we get based on those two minor changes. So pressure point 5, cane under the right arm, hips forward at P1, changing the condition of the club at P6 with very little conscious effort during the swing. It's just a setup change and an awareness of what the arms are doing during the backswing. Good luck with it, and look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks' time.